I was sitting in a marble mansion, surrounded by strangers, listening to a billionaire's will, and then my name was on his lips. As the room froze, my own mother stood up, face white as paper, and screamed, "That's not your real name." In that moment, I realized two things at once. This man wasn't a stranger, and my family had been lying to me my entire life. My name is Chloe Rivera, and on a Tuesday morning so cold the air felt like biting glass, I was standing outside the gates of a dead billionaire's house, feeling like a common thief. We were somewhere in the hills outside Denver, in one of those neighborhoods where the houses aren't just houses, they're compounds. The gates of the late Gregory Hale's estate were black wrought iron, tall enough to keep out an invading army, or at least people like me, my navy blue blazer, a decent find from the Ark thrift store on Colfax, felt paper thin against the wind. I clutched the strap of my cheap synthetic leather purse, my knuckles white, the pleather groaning in the cold. "Stand up straight, Chloe," my mother, Maria, hissed beside me. Her voice was pitched low, but she smiled sweetly, respectfully. For the benefit of the other mourners filing past us through the massive gates, I was only here because she had insisted. The news of Gregory Hale's death had been a passing headline on the local news, a titan of logistics, a local recluse, dead at 75. We had never spoken his name in our house, not once. Yet, when the invitation addressed vaguely to the Rivera family arrived on heavy cream cardstock, my mother had acted as if we'd lost a dear friend. "He was a generous man to the community. Mija," she'd said, her voice dripping with that performative sincerity I knew so well. She had clipped the obituary and placed it on the fridge. "Showing up is the respectful thing to do. It's about connections." Respectful felt like a lie. I felt like I was crashing a funeral for a man I'd never met, and I was late for my actual job. The gates swung open, and we walked up a heated stone driveway toward a house that looked more like a university library than a home. The front doors, carved from wood so dark it looked black, were opened by silent staff in crisp gray uniforms. The moment my feet hit the foyer, I knew I was out of my depth. It was marble, white and gray veined marble that clicked loudly under the sharp heels of the other guests, but seemed to muffle the sound of my own worn-down loafers. The air smelled like old money, lemon oil, and lilies, so many lilies. Their scent was cloying, suffocating. The walls were covered in massive oil paintings, dark, brooding landscapes, stern portraits of people long dead, people who looked like they owned the very air we were breathing. My mother, Maria Rivera, glided across the floor as if she belonged there. She was a master performer. Her black dress was modest, her pearls were fake but convincing from 10 feet away, and her handbag was carefully polished, though I knew she'd bought it at a discount outlet 2 years ago. She was all quiet grace and somber nods to people we didn't know. Her public face snapped firmly in place. My father, Tom Rivera, was her shadow. He was already jittery, his eyes darting everywhere but at the other guests. He clutched a small paper cup of coffee from the service table like a lifeline, his knuckles matching the white of the cup. He looked like a man waiting for a blow to land, or perhaps just waiting for the first acceptable moment to find something stronger than coffee. And then there was Evan, my younger brother, the golden child. Evan wasn't observing. He was consuming. His phone was half hidden in his palm, the camera lens peeking out. He was absorbing the sheer, staggering wealth of the place, his eyes wide with the thrill of it. "Dude, this is insane," he whispered to me, already framing a shot of a chandelier that looked like it was made of actual diamonds. "This would kill on my feed. The grieving billionaire aesthetic." I just nodded, pulling my blazer tighter. I felt like a field mouse in a lion's den. We were guided by one of the staff into a large drawing room or parlor, more dark wood, more portraits, and rows of uncomfortable-looking antique chairs facing a heavy mahogany lectern. We took seats near the back, a strategic move by my mother close enough to be seen, far enough to observe. I watched the other guests. They were a different species. The women wore tailored black suits and understated jewelry that probably cost more than my annual salary at Northline Metrics. The men murmured in low tones, checking their expensive watches. They looked annoyed, not grieving. This was business. But the strangest thing was happening. As people settled, I caught it. A few of the older guests, the ones who looked like they truly belonged here, clocked my parents. Their eyes would pass over us, then snap back, locking onto my mother and father. It wasn't recognition. Not exactly. It was something else. Assessment. A tightening around the mouth. A quick, whispered comment to the person next to them. A woman with severe silver hair and a diamond brooch stared openly at my father until he physically shrank in his chair, turning to gulp more of his coffee. My parents weren't just unknown guests. They were known, and apparently, not well liked. A cold knot of confusion tightened in my stomach. What past did they have in this house, with these people, that I knew nothing about? A hush fell as a man in an impeccably tailored three-piece suit walked to the front of the room. He was tall, thin, and looked about as welcoming as a closed bank vault. He stood behind the lectern, arranged his papers, and stared out at us. "Good morning," he said, his voice as dry as old paper. "I am Miles Bracken, of Hale and Bracken LLP, Mr. Hale's personal attorney and the executor of his estate." He adjusted his glasses and looked out over the room. "We are here today, as instructed, to read the last will and testament of Gregory Thomas Hale. I know this is a difficult time." His eyes scanned the crowd, and I felt a chill as he continued. "Mr. Hale was a private man. He died, as far as most of you know, without children. As far as most of you know." The words hung in the air, heavy and strange. A few people shifted in their seats. A low murmur started and died. My mother sat perfectly still, her hands clasped in her lap, but I saw her thumbnail digging a white crescent into the back of her other hand. My gaze drifted from the lawyer to the wall above the massive, unlit fireplace. There was an enormous framed portrait of Gregory Hale himself. It wasn't the sterile corporate photo from the news. This was the man. He was standing in a field, looking severe, powerful, and deeply unhappy. He couldn't have been older than 50 in the painting. I stared at it, and my breath caught in my throat. It was his eyes, dark, intense, set under a heavy brow, and his jawline a sharp, uncompromising angle that I'd always thought I got from some distant, unknown relative on my father's side. I stared until my vision blurred, feeling a bizarre, electric pull. It was the same jawline I saw in my own mirror every single morning. The same eyes. I shook my head, tearing my gaze away. It was imagination, grief, or stress, or just the weirdness of the day, making me see patterns that weren't there. I was a Rivera. We were from Aurora. We ran a struggling restaurant. We were nobodies. Mr. Bracken cleared his throat and began to read from the thick, bonded document. The language was dense, legal. "To the Denver Children's Hospital, I bequeath the sum of $5 million, he went on. Charities, museums, endowments for universities I'd only seen in brochures. The air in the room grew thick with tension. The distant cousins and old business partners, the ones with the judgmental eyes, were waiting for the real money, the personal assets. To my groundskeeper, Miguel Ortega, for 25 years of loyal service, the sum of $200,000 and lifetime use of the cottage on the south lawn." A man in a worn suit in the back let out a quiet sob. "To my former sister-in-law, Beatrice Vance, despite our profound differences, I leave the contents of the wine cellar and nothing more." The woman with the silver hair and the diamond brooch made a small, choked sound of outrage. My brother Evan was getting bored, already scrolling on his phone, no doubt checking his social media engagement. My father was staring at his empty coffee cup as if willing it to refill itself. My mother looked like a statue carved from ice, her posture perfect. I was just counting the seconds until we could leave, until I could go back to my tiny apartment, my spreadsheets, and my normal, complicated enough life. The lawyer turned a page. The atmosphere shifted. This was it, the big one. "And now," Mr. Bracken said, his voice steady, We come to the remainder of the estate. All personal properties, including this house and its contents, all liquid assets, and the controlling shares in Hale Logistics Group. Everyone leaned in. I could feel the greed in the air. It was a physical, sour weight. Are to be placed in trust, managed by Hale and Bracken LLP, for the sole benefit of my granddaughter. A collective gasp sucked the air from the room. Granddaughter. The whispers started instantly, a hiss of snakes. Who? He had a child. Whose is it? It's a lie. Mr. Bracken held up a hand for silence. He looked down at the paper, and then, for the first time, his eyes scanned the room and landed directly, unequivocally, on me. He continued, his voice projecting clearly into the stunned silence. To Ms. Celine Navarro, residing at, and he read my address, my current address, the one for the one-bedroom apartment I could barely afford in Capitol Hill. I froze. My blood turned to slush. My entire body went numb. Celine Navarro. That wasn't my name, but that was my apartment. My mind was racing, a screeching, high-pitched whine, trying to make sense of the two facts. Was it a mistake? A different tenant in my building. But he was looking at me. The whole room was looking at me. I didn't get a chance to process it. I couldn't even form a thought. Beside me, my mother shot to her feet. The movement was so violent, so sudden, that her chair scraped backward and toppled over, hitting the marble floor with a sickening crack. Her face was white, not pale. It was a terrifying, bloodless white, like a sheet of paper that had been soaked and dried. Her eyes were wide, bulging, fixed on the lawyer. Her carefully constructed mask of sweet grieving neighbor had not just slipped, it had shattered. No, she whispered, a choked, strangled sound. And then she screamed. It wasn't a ladylike objection. It was a raw, guttural shriek that tore through the suffocating silence of the mansion, echoing off the high ceilings and the cold marble. That's not your real name. The world stopped. Every single person in that room, the judge relatives, the board business partners, the weeping groundskeeper, my stunned father, my brother who finally looked up from his phone snapped their heads to look at her, and then, as one, their eyes swiveled to me. The room erupted. It wasn't just murmurs. It was a wave of sound. What did she say? Who is that? Is that the girl? Did she say Navarro? I saw a flash in the corner of my eye. Someone, a cousin perhaps, was recording on their phone, the little red light glowing. The lawyer, Mr. Bracken, stopped mid-sentence. He didn't look surprised. He looked confirmed. He simply watched my mother, his expression flat, as she stood there, trembling, exposed, her hand half covering her mouth as if to shove the words back in. My father was trying to pull her down, hissing, Maria, Maria, sit down, por favor, sit down. But she was locked in place, her chest heaving, her eyes still locked on the lawyer, the full, horrifying weight of what she had done crashing down on her. I couldn't feel my hands. I couldn't feel the floor beneath my feet. The portrait of Gregory Hale seemed to be staring right at me, his painted eyes full of secrets I was never supposed to know, in a stranger's mansion, in front of witnesses and a dead man's money. My mother just accidentally confessed that my whole life was a lie. The marble room in the Hale mansion was a universe away from my childhood. My world wasn't marble and oil paintings. It was a cramped, two-bedroom rental in Aurora, in a part of town where the streets smelled like exhaust and old frying oil. My parents had always described the house as temporary. They had been saying that for 20 years, just until things pick up, my father, Tom, would say. His gaze fixed on the peeling laminate of the kitchen counter, as if it were a temporary inconvenience and not the backdrop of our entire lives. I learned my role in that house before I learned long division. I was Chloe Rivera, the responsible one, the quiet daughter, the sensible one. While other kids played, I was the one walking my younger brother, Evan, home from school. my hand clamped tight around his wrist because he was a runner and I was his keeper. I would set him up with cartoons and make him a snack peanut butter on crackers before starting my own homework at the worn Formica kitchen table. The noise of his video games and my mother's loud, dramatic phone calls blended into a dull roar that I learned to filter out. I learned not to ask for much. Asking for things meant burdening my parents. Silence meant peace. Evan was the opposite. He wasn't quiet. He was a performance. He was loud, charming, and absorbed every watt of light in the room. He was the sun, and I was the small, orbiting rock, tasked with making sure his gravity didn't pull him into danger. Our family's poverty was selective, and it always seemed to select me. I remember one Christmas when I was 12. I desperately needed a new winter coat. The zipper on my old one was broken, and the Colorado wind cut right through it. I got a puffy beige hand-me-down from a church donation drive. The cuffs were frayed, and it smelled faintly of someone else's attic. I was told to be grateful. That same afternoon, my parents presented Evan with a brand-new, gleaming white gaming console. He screamed with joy. Tackling my father in a hug that knocked the wind out of him, I must have looked hurt. Staring at the beige monstrosity that was supposed to be my gift, my mother, Maria, saw my face and pulled me into the kitchen, her grip tight on my arm. Her voice dropped to that low, sickly sweet whisper she reserved for emotional repairs. "You're the sensible one. Mija," she murmured, stroking my hair, her nails scraping lightly against my scalp. "He's sensitive. He's a boy. You know he needs more. You understand, don't you?" I nodded. I always nodded. I learned that my understanding was my currency. My ability to absorb disappointment was my primary function. Looking back, the cracks in their story were always there. There was money. Sometimes, it just never felt like our money. Every few months, a thick cream-colored envelope would arrive in our mailbox. It had no return address, just a corporate postmark from a Denver zip code I didn't recognize. My mother would become tense on those days, sharp and quiet, snatching the mail before anyone else could. She would lock herself in her bedroom and emerge an hour later, calmer, but with a brittle edge. She'd shove the contents I assumed it was cash, or maybe a check, into the back of the bill drawer in the kitchen, a place Evan and I were forbidden to touch. "Just some tax refunds," she'd mutter if I asked, but they didn't come in April. They came in March, June, September, and December, like clockwork. Sunday dinners were mandatory. They were the stage for my father's weekly performance on the virtue of our struggle. After we'd finished the carne asada my mother had cooked and I had cleaned up, Tom would lean back in his chair, a Coors Light in his hand, and survey his tiny kingdom. "You kids," he'd start, his voice thick with a martyr's humility. "You don't know how good you have it." He would launch into a speech about sacrifice, about how hard we work so you kids can have a better life. He'd talk about his long, brutal hours managing Rivera's table, the small restaurant he ran that, despite his speeches, never seemed to be out of financial trouble. The speeches always ended the same way, his eyes landing heavily on me. "We sacrifice everything for this family. All we ask is that you be grateful, Chloe, that you remember what we do for you." Gratitude was the rent I paid for existing in their house. The mask of equal sacrifice slipped permanently the year we both turned 17. Evan got his driver's license in May, for his birthday in June. A car appeared in our sputtering driveway. It was a 15-year-old Mustang, dark blue, slightly battered on the passenger side, but undeniably cool. My father presented the keys to him like he was knighting him, so he can get to school and work. He announced proudly to the neighborhood, Evan didn't have a job, and he was barely passing his classes. My birthday was in September. I got a monthly RTD bus pass and a lecture. My mother sat me down at the kitchen table, the bus pass a small, laminated rectangle between us. "This is a good thing, Chloe. It teaches you responsibility. It builds character. Your brother, he needs the help." I remember sitting on the number 15 bus the next Monday morning, the vinyl seat cold and cracked through my thin jeans, watching the identical modest houses of Aurora slide by in the pre-dawn light. It wasn't the car. I hadn't expected a car. It was the lecture. Evan got a machine that represented freedom and status. I got a lesson on responsibility. It was the first time I felt that strange, nameless sting, the cold, hollow realization of being useful, but not cherished. It was the exact same feeling that would wash over me years later. Every time I saw my bank balance drop after wiring them money, when I got my acceptance letter to Rockmont State University, my parents cried. It was real, genuine pride. I was the first Rivera going to a 4-year university. I had earned a scholarship, nearly a full ride, based on my grades. I had visions of a dorm room, of late-night study sessions in the library, of finally having a space that was just mine, a door I could close. My mother crushed that dream within an hour. A dorm. "Don't be ridiculous, Chloe," she said, laughing as if I'd told a silly joke. "You'll live at home. Think of the money we'll save. You can help your father at the restaurant on weekends." So I did. I lived at home. I took the bus for an hour and a half each way. My scholarship money paying for my books and fees, the rest of my financial aid refund, the part meant for living expenses, just sort of got absorbed into the family fund to cover the bills that the mysterious envelopes apparently didn't. Meanwhile, Evan drifted. He enrolled at the Community College of Aurora and dropped out after 6 weeks, claiming the professors didn't get him. He decided he was going to be a YouTube streamer. His failures were never failures. They were experiences. His inability to hold a job was just him finding himself. My father funded his endless string of new cameras, high-end microphones, and upgraded gaming rigs, all purchased on temporary credit, but my A- in advanced calculus was met with a tight-lipped nod and a warning. "Don't let it slip, mija," my father warned. "That scholarship is our future." Evan's endeavors were investments in his potential. My achievements were obligations. Throughout it all, there were the slip-ups, small, strange comments from my mother, usually late at night when she'd had an extra glass of wine and her guard was down. We'd be looking at one of the few baby pictures I had. There were hardly any of me before age 4. She'd sigh, tracing the outline of my face in the photo. "You know, we had other options when you were born. Chloe, things could have been very different for us." I'd ask her what she meant. She would wave her hand, her face closing off instantly, the warmth vanishing. "Nothing. Never mind. God gave you to us. That's what matters. We chose this life." It always sounded like a justification, not a celebration. Back then, I thought I understood where I came from. I was Chloe Rivera, the responsible daughter from Aurora, the one who worked hard, the one who would eventually save the family, just as soon as things picked up. I just didn't know that my origin story came with a price tag. Moving out of my parents' house was like coming up for air after being held underwater for 22 years. I got my first real job, an entry-level position as a data analyst at a mid-sized tech company downtown called Northline Metrics. The office was all clean lines, glass walls, and quiet, focused energy. My desk was small, but it was mine. I loved the work. It was logical. It was clean. Numbers didn't lie. Spreadsheets didn't gaslight you. I was good at it. And for the first time in my life, I felt a sense of competence that was entirely my own. The paycheck was the best part. It was real. Adult money, after my first one hit my bank account, I spent an hour just staring at the number on my phone. It felt like power. It felt like freedom. It was enough to cover my rent in Capitol Hill, my student loan payments, my groceries, and still have a little left over. I called home that night, buzzing with my new success. The first-generation graduate made good. I got my first paycheck, I announced. Picturing them smiling, they exploded. My mother, Maria, was ecstatic, her voice hitting a register of pride I hadn't heard since I'd won the state spelling bee in middle school. "Oh, mija, that's incredible. Our girl is finally making it, Tom. Come listen. Chloe's on her way." I heard my father pick up the extension, his voice gruff with emotion. "That's our Chloe. We always knew you were the smart one. You see, Maria, I told you, She's going to be the one to save the family, my mother joked. Her laugh bright and brittle. Our little millionaire, I laughed with them. But the joke landed heavily in my stomach. A cold, hard knot. It was supposed to be funny, but it sounded like a job description. The first request came 3 weeks later, right before my next paycheck was due. My mother called, her voice breezy at first, asking about my job, about my apartment, about the weather. Then, the inevitable pivot. Listen, mija, she said, her voice dropping, acquiring that familiar, weary edge. I hate to even ask you. You know I would never ask if it wasn't a real emergency. I tensed, my fingers tightening on my phone. What's wrong? Mom, it's the restaurant, she sighed. Rivera's table, my father's albatross. Your father. He's so proud. He won't tell anyone. But we're just a little behind on rent this month. The supplier overcharged us. It's a whole thing. We just need to cover it until things pick up next week. How much, I asked. My voice flat. Just $900. It's just this once. Chloe, I promise. We'll pay you back the second the weekend invoices clear. $900. That was almost my entire food and utilities budget for the month. I looked around my small, sparse apartment. Yeah, Mom, I heard myself say. Yeah, okay, I can do that. Oh, Chloe, you are an angel, a blessing from God, she gushed. All traces of weariness gone, replaced by pure, shining relief. You've saved us. Your father will be so happy. We'll pay you back on Friday. Friday came and went. There was no mention of repayment. I felt good. Though, for about a week, I felt like the adult I wanted to be. The grateful daughter who could finally step up and help the parents who had sacrificed everything for me. I was just doing my part. A month later, my phone rang at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night. It was my father, Tom, which was rare. His voice was thick with panic. Chloe, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry to call this late. Dad, what's wrong? Is everyone okay? It's the utilities. Mija, they're going to shut off the power. At the house. Tomorrow. He let that hang in the air. The image of them in the dark. Of Evan's gaming console going silent. Of the food in the fridge spoiling. I can't let your brother live like that, he whispered, his voice cracking. He's still, he needs us. Evan was 22 years old and finding himself by sleeping until noon and streaming video games to an audience of 7 people. How much this time? Dad. $550, just to get them off our backs. I get paid on Monday. I can give it right back to you. I wired the money from my banking app before I even got out of bed. I ate instant noodles for the next 2 weeks. That was the beginning. The tap was open, and it would not be closed. The pattern formed so quickly, so seamlessly, that I barely registered it as a pattern at all. It just became my life. A phone call would come, a surprise car repair, a sudden medical bill for my mother's migraines, an unexpected shortage at the restaurant's cash register. Each request was an emergency. Each one was just this once. Each one was the last time, I promise. And after every transfer, the praise. I was their savior. I was their rock. You always come through. Chloe, God really blessed us with you. What would we do without you? Mija, you're the strong one. The praise was a drug, a temporary balm on the wound of my shrinking bank account. It was the love I had been trained to barter for. I started to cut back. My life shrank to fit their needs. I stopped going to happy hours with my coworkers at Northline. A $7 craft beer felt like a betrayal when my parents were struggling. I politely declined invitations for weekend trips. I walked the extra 6 blocks to the budget grocery store, buying dented cans and day-old bread. My grocery cart was filled with rice, beans, and plain pasta. A cavity in my back molar started to throb. A dull, persistent ache. I ignored it. Dental work was a luxury I couldn't afford. My car, a 10-year-old sedan, needed new tires. But I kept driving on the balding ones, my knuckles white on the steering wheel every time it rained. I told myself it was temporary. I was building character. Just like my mother said, it was just until they got back on their feet. But when I visited home on Sundays for our mandatory dinners, the story in front of my eyes didn't match the one I was being told on the phone. The peeling laminate counter in the kitchen had been replaced with a smooth, dark granite. The old, sagging floral sofa in the living room was gone, and in its place sat a massive, plush gray sectional. I knew for a fact they couldn't have gotten for less than $2,000. The television, once a modest 32-inch screen, was now a 65-inch flat screen mounted on the wall. When I stopped by the restaurant to drop off some paperwork for my dad, I saw it. Sitting on the counter, gleaming under the track lighting, was a brand new, commercial-grade, stainless steel espresso machine, the kind that cost more than my car. I stood there, staring at it, the smell of burnt coffee and cleaning solution sharp in my nose. I had just wired my father $400 for emergency food supplies for the kitchen 2 days earlier. "Isn't it beautiful?" my mother said, beaming as she wiped it down with a cloth. "Your father got an incredible deal. It's going to change everything for the business." I did the math in my head. The sofa, the counter, the TV, the machine. It didn't add up. The money I was sending, the money that was supposed to be for rent and utilities and survival, was leaking, or it was being supplemented. The real evidence was Evan. He was thriving. While I was wearing shoes with the soles separating, he was unboxing brand new, limited edition sneakers on his stream. While I was putting off an oil change, he had upgraded his entire camera and lighting setup to GoPro. "It's awesome," he bragged to me over dinner, his mouth full of my mother's cooking. "Dad's restaurant is finally doing numbers. He said things are really picking up." I looked at my father, who was pointedly staring at his plate, shoveling food into his mouth. I looked at my mother, who was smiling at Evan with a look of pure, unadulterated adoration. I felt a cold, sick rage rise in my throat. I had eaten oatmeal for dinner 3 times that week. Later that night, I tried to bring it up. I cornered my mother in the kitchen, my voice small, my hands shaking. "Mom," I started, my voice barely a whisper. I saw Evan's new sneakers, and the new couch, and things just seem better. I'm glad, but I'm still paying the electric bill." My mother's face hardened instantly. The warmth evaporated, replaced by that familiar, disappointed chill. She put down the dish she was drying and turned to me, her eyes sharp. "I can't believe you. Chloe, are you keeping score? Is that what this is?" "No, your father works his fingers to the bone for this family. That restaurant is his dream. And yes, things are starting to pick up. We're allowed to have 1 or 2 nice things, aren't we? Or do you want us to live in a hovel forever? That's not what I mean. It's just, Evan is your brother," she snapped, her voice rising. "You're the strong one. You always have been. Your brother, he's still figuring things out. He's sensitive. He needs our support. Don't you dare punish us for loving you differently. Don't you dare throw the help you give in our faces. We did everything for you." The shame hit me like a physical blow, hot and suffocating. She was right. I was being selfish. I was being ungrateful. I was the strong one. I could take it. So I apologized. And the next week, I wired them another $300. The requests stopped being requests. They became assumptions. "Chloe, I'm sending you the gas bill. Can you just take care of it? Your father needs 2 new tires for the catering van. The total is $280. I wasn't a daughter anymore. I was a utility. I was an ATM with a pulse, a feature of their monthly budget. The line item labeled Chloe, and the shame of it all, the shame of their dependency, the shame of my resentment kept me locked in place, silent and compliant. One night, I was sitting alone in my dark apartment, the blue light of my phone illuminating my face. I had just gotten another text from my mom. "Need groceries. Mija. Just the basics. Love you." I opened my banking app. I scrolled and scrolled and scrolled. 2 years of my life, documented in a long, relentless list of outgoing payments. Thomas Rivera, Maria Rivera, Rivera's table. The numbers blurred together. A cascade of my own sacrifice. I saw my dental work, my new tires, my social life, my savings, all flowing in one direction, away from me. I sat there in the quiet, the only sound the hum of the refrigerator, and I whispered it out loud to the empty room. When did love start to look like a ledger? I stayed late at Northline Metrics. Long after the last of the ambitious junior executives had gone home, the office was dark, hushed, the silence broken only by the rhythmic click of my keyboard and the low electronic hum of the servers in the glass room down the hall. My boss, if he'd seen me, would have assumed I was running extra analytics on the quarterly projections, earning my keep. He would have been half right. I was running analytics, but the data set wasn't Northline's. It was mine. For the past 2 hours, I had been meticulously exporting my banking history from the past 3 years. I had created a new spreadsheet, my movements precise, my focus absolute. I built the columns: date, amount, recipient, purpose. The purpose column was a litany of my own weakness. Mom, utilities. Dad, restaurant supplies. Evan, car repair. Mom, medical bill. Dad, rent emergency. I scrolled down the amount column, the numbers blurring. Each one represented a choice I'd made. A night I'd eaten pasta with no sauce, a movie I'd skipped, the throb in my back tooth that I actively ignored. I went to the bottom of the column, my hands steady on the mouse. I typed the formula: B2, B21 scene. I hit the enter key. The number that populated the cell made the air rush out of my lungs. It was stark, black, and obscene. I ran the calculation again, certain I had made a mistake. I hadn't. $47,320. I felt physically sick. The room, which had felt cool and air-conditioned, suddenly felt hot and suffocating. $47,000. It was more than my entire balance of student loan debt. I could have been free. I could have had a savings account. I could have had a life that wasn't a constant, grinding exercise and self-denial. Instead, my parents had a granite countertop and Evan had a new streaming setup. I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, staring at the number. It wasn't help. It was a hemorrhage. My inbox pinged, the small sound making me jump in the silence. It was an email from Human Resources. The subject line read, "Urgent Benefits Portal Migration Legal Documentation." I clicked it open, grateful for the distraction. It was a bland, corporate memo about our system-wide benefits update, in order to ensure compliance and accuracy in the new portal. We require all employees to upload a high-resolution scan of their original birth certificate. This is to verify legal name and date of birth. A simple logistical task. I made a mental note to dig it out when I went to my parents' house for Sunday dinner. That weekend, I found it, in the back of my parents' hall closet, in a dented metal file box marked Important Papers. I found the folder with my name. Chloe, written on the tab in my mother's looping cursive. Inside, tucked behind my Social Security card, was the official copy, heavy, cream-colored paper, issued by the Colorado Department of Public Health. The state seal raised and embossed in the corner. I unfolded it, and I stared. The name typed in the box labeled "Full Name of Child" was not Chloe Rivera. It was Celine Navarro Hale. My heart didn't panic. It just went cold and heavy, a sudden hard stop in my chest. I read the rest of the document. Date of birth, March 12th, 1994. Correct. Place of birth, Rose Medical Center. Correct. Mother's full maiden name, Maria Celine Navarro. Correct. Father's full name. The box was empty. A single, typed line drawn straight through it. Celine, my mother's middle name, Navarro. Her maiden name, but Hale. Where in God's name did Hale come from? I sank down onto the floor of the hallway. The smell of dust and old coats thickened my nose. It had to be a clerical error, a bizarre, massive typo that was never corrected, but a memory surfaced, sharp and unwelcome. I was 11, maybe 12, at a friend's house, flipping through her baby album. It was thick with photos, fuzzy images of her in a hospital bassinet, her first birthday, her first missing tooth. I had gone home and asked my mother, "Mom, how come we don't have a baby album for me, Maria?" who had been cooking, went rigid. She slammed the cabinet door shut, the sound cracking through the kitchen. We didn't have money for expensive cameras and photo albums. Chloe, she'd snapped, her voice like ice. We were struggling. Stop asking for things you know we couldn't have. Her reaction had been too big, too angry for the simple question. I never asked again. Now, I realized the truth. It wasn't that there were few pictures of me as a baby. There were none. Every photo in our house started when I was around 4 years old. Around the time I learned to write the name Chloe, my hands were shaking. I pulled out my phone and called my mother at the restaurant, forcing my voice to sound light, confused. Hey, Mom, weird question. HR at my work needs a copy of my birth certificate for the new benefit system. I paused, taking a breath. I'm looking at the one from the file box, and it has a weird name on it. It says Celine Navarro Hale. That's just a crazy typo from the hospital, right? Silence, not a pause. It was a complete and total absence of sound, a vacuum on the other end of the line. I could hear the distant clatter of dishes in the restaurant kitchen, but from her, nothing. Mom? Oh, that? She finally said, her voice a full octave higher than normal, brittle with false laughter. That old thing, my goodness, I forgot about that. It's just a silly mistake. Mija. A typo. Just like you said, the hospital spelled everything wrong. Don't send them that one. It's not right. But it's the official copy, I said, my grip on the phone tightening. It's the only one in the box. HR said they need the original. No, she said, her words tumbling over each other. You don't understand. I'll handle it. Don't you worry about it. I'll find the other copy, the corrected one. Or I'll just call your HR department myself and explain. They don't really need it. It's just red tape. I'll handle it. The two most terrifying words in my mother's vocabulary. It was what she said before she hid a problem, before she spun a new lie. Okay, Mom, I said quietly. I've got to go. I hung up before she could say another word. The lie was so blatant, so poorly constructed. It was insulting. I didn't go back to my apartment. I went to the downtown library. I got on a public computer and went to the Denver County Public Records website. I paid the $17 fee with my debit card and submitted a request for vital records verification for Chloe Rivera, born on my birthday. No records found. My blood ran cold. I submitted a new request. Celine Navarro Hale. The confirmation was almost instantaneous. A digital copy of the record I held in my hand, and attached to it, a second file, a legal petition for a change of name, filed by Maria Celine Navarro. Date October 5th, 1998. I was 4.5 years old. It wasn't a typo. It was an erasure. I needed to hear his voice. I called my father. He was the weak one, the one who buckled under pressure. Dad, I said, my voice low and steady. I was past panic now. I was in the cold, clear space of a problem I had to solve. I just pulled my legal records from the county. My name was Celine Navarro Hale. You and Mom legally changed it when I was 4. Why? He let out a long, slow breath. It was the sound of a man who had been holding that breath for 20 years. Chloe, he began, his voice rough with a weariness I'd never heard before. It's complicated. Mija. Complicated how who is Hale? It's just old family history, he muttered, his voice dropping, becoming evasive. Old mistakes. Things from before. I was before we were a family. It doesn't matter now. Chloe, it's in the past. Your mother, she just wanted a fresh start. For all of us. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. The family motto. The words they use to scrub away any inconvenient truth. I disconnected the call. The two lies swirled in my head. The lie about the money. The lie about my name. For 3 years, they had been bleeding me dry, acting like they were destitute. But they had spent 20 years hiding a name that wasn't Rivera, a name that wasn't Navarro, Hale. The world tilted. The lies weren't separate. They had to be connected. A few days later, the final crack appeared. I got an alert from my bank, a text message this time. Unusual activity detected. A new external account has been linked to your checking. I logged into my banking app so fast, my thumb fumbled the password. There, on my dashboard, was a new account, a savings sub-account. It was titled Rivera Family Emergency, and the joint access holders listed were Chloe Rivera and Thomas Rivera. I hadn't authorized it. I hadn't signed anything. He had used my social security number, my personal information, which, of course, he had, and linked his name to my money, not as a request, as an infrastructure. They were building a permanent plumbing system to drain me more efficiently. I stared at the screen, the rage finally burning through the confusion. They hadn't just leaned on me. They hadn't just gotten into trouble and needed help. They had structured their entire financial survival around me. I was their plan. And it was then that I knew. The name they hid. Hale. It had to be about money. They hid a name that had value, and they drained the value from the new one they gave me. My fingers, numb and cold, moved to my laptop's browser. I opened a new tab. I typed the name from my birth certificate, Hale, and then, because it was the only other clue I had, I added the city, Gregory Hale, Denver. The screen flooded with results, news articles, business journals, society pages. Denver business titan, Gregory Hale. Dies at 75. Logistics magnate Gregory Hale. Leaves complicated legacy, billionaire recluse. Gregory Hale. Dead. I clicked on the first image result. It was a recent photo. A stern, older man with silver hair and powerful, dark eyes. But the second photo was from a Forbes profile from 20 years ago. A younger man, maybe in his mid-50s, standing in front of a fleet of trucks. My breath hitched. I knew that face. I knew that jawline. I knew those eyes. They were the same ones that stared back at me from my own goddamn mirror every single morning. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely control the mouse. I clicked on the main obituary from the Denver Post. I read through the details of his company. Hale Logistics Group, his billions, his reclusiveness. I scrolled down, past the philanthropic donations, to the small paragraph about his personal life. Mr. Hale was predeceased by his only son, Daniel Hale, who died in a tragic car accident in his early 20s. My eyes scanned the next line, and the world stopped. He is survived by no acknowledged grandchildren. Acknowledged, one word, a word that meant everything, a word that was a door, left intentionally unlocked. Celine Navarro Hale, was not acknowledged. I was Chloe Rivera, the talking bank account for the people who had hidden me from a billionaire. I didn't go back to the office for 2 days. I called in sick, my voice a credible, hollow croak. I didn't sleep. My apartment, my small, safe space, transformed into a command center. The anger had burned away, leaving behind a cold, clear, analytical calm. I was a data analyst, and my life had just become the most critical project I would ever work on. My laptop was open, the screen glowing in the dark room. I wasn't just Googling anymore. I was in the deep archives, the paid databases, the places where the digital ghosts of the past are stored. I cross-referenced public records, court filings, and archived newspaper articles from the Denver Business Journal and the Post. Gregory Hale, founder, Hale Logistics Group, a self-made billionaire with a trucking and warehousing empire that spanned the continent. He was known for being ruthless in negotiations and obsessively, pathologically private. I found the pictures. Gregory in the 1980s, his dark hair thick, his face already set in that hard, uncompromising mask. Gregory shaking hands with the governor, Gregory breaking ground on a new distribution center, and then, buried deep in a Rocky Mountain News Society page from the late 1960s, a rare personal photo, a stiff, unsmiling Gregory in a suit, holding the hand of a small, dark-haired baby in a sailor outfit. The caption read, Gregory Hale and his son, Daniel Hale, the predeceased son. The one who died in a car accident. I needed to see him, not as a baby, but as a man. Finding him was harder. The family's privacy was a digital fortress. But I was good at my job. I found him in the archives of a defunct Colorado prep school yearbook, the Boulder Peaks Academy. 1991, a grainy, pixelated photo of the debate team. Daniel Hale. 92. My breath left my body in a single, painful rush. It was my face. It wasn't a vague similarity. It wasn't my imagination in that marble-filled room. It was my face. The same angular chin, the same heavy brow, the same dark, deep-set eyes that I saw every morning, the ones my mother always said I got from a distant Rivera cousin. I was staring at a teenage boy who had been dead for over 20 years, and he was, without a single shred of doubt, my father. I found the accident report. 1993, a winding road near Estes Park, a sports car, too fast. He was 22. A brief, sterile article mentioned Gregory Hale was devastated by the loss of his only heir. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I was born in 1994. Less than a year after he died. I had the who. Now I needed the how. How did Maria Celine Navarro, my mother, fit into this picture of billionaires and dead heirs? I cross-referenced Gregory Hale and Maria Rivera. Nothing. Daniel Hale and Maria Rivera. Nothing. Then, I tried the name from my birth certificate, the name my mother had screamed. Gregory Hale and Celine Navarro. A single result popped up from the Denver County Civil Court archives. My blood turned to ice. It was a lawsuit. Filed, 1995. Plaintiff Gregory T. Hale. Defendant Celine Navarro. I paid the $20 access fee with my trembling hand. The scanned document filled my screen. The charges: fraud, misrepresentation, and interference with parental rights. Celine Navarro. I looked at the birth certificate on my desk. Mother's full maiden name: Maria Celine Navarro. My mother was Celine Navarro. The lawsuit alleged that Ms. Navarro, a former employee of Hale Logistics Group, had become pregnant by the plaintiff's late son, Daniel Hale. It claimed she had deceptively concealed the existence of the plaintiff's sole surviving grandchild and refused all good faith attempts at establishing contact. Gregory Hale was suing for sole custody of a child, of me. The case was listed as dismissed without prejudice. It never went to trial. They had settled. A former employee. I went straight to LinkedIn. I didn't search for Maria Rivera, the struggling restaurant manager's wife. I searched for Maria Navarro, and there she was, a grainy, professional headshot from the early 90s. Her face was younger, sharper, ambitious, and hungry. The job title was stark and clear: Junior Accountant, Accounts Payable, Hale Logistics Group, 1991 to 1993. She worked at his company. She met his son, Daniel. She got pregnant. Daniel died. And my mother, Maria, was left holding the only living heir to the Hale fortune. The entire sordid story laid itself out in my mind. My mother, a junior accountant, facing down a grieving, controlling billionaire. He sued her for interfering with his parental rights over me, and my mother, the ultimate negotiator, had used me as her single greatest bargaining chip. She must have agreed to drop the lawsuit in exchange for money, and in exchange for her silence, her disappearance. She took the settlement. She changed her name. She changed my name, erasing Celine Navarro Hale and creating Chloe Rivera, and she found a quiet, compliant man, Tom Rivera, to marry her and play the part of a father, to legitimize the lie, the money, those mysterious envelopes from my childhood, the tax refunds. I didn't have access to my mother's bank accounts, but I had access to an old dormant savings account my parents had opened for me when I was in high school. I hadn't looked at it in years. I managed to reset the password, my heart pounding. I pulled up the archived statements. There it was, not cash in an envelope, electronic funds transfers, quarterly deposits, going back to my earliest records, the Sender Hale Family Holdings Trust. The deposits were $5,000 every 3 months, $20,000 a year, every year of my childhood. This was the money that paid for the temporary rental in Aurora. This was the money my parents called sacrifice. I scrolled forward, year after year, until I hit the statement for March 2012, my 18th birthday. The deposits stopped, the day I became a legal adult. The trust fund money, the settlement money, Gregory Hale's money, dried up. I pulled up the spreadsheet I had made of my own payments to them. The first emergency request for $900, the one that had saved them. I checked the date. June 2014. 2 months after I graduated college and got my first real paycheck, the Hale Trust Fund ran out, and they were desperate, so they simply plugged the leak. They replaced their old source of income with a new one. Me. I was shaking. A deep, cold rage vibrating in my bones. I had to know one more thing. Had Gregory Hale known I was gone? Or had he tried to find me? I looked up the name of the law firm from the obituary. Hale Bracken, LLP. I picked up my phone. My voice, when I spoke, was unrecognizable. It was cool, calm, and professional. "Hi," I said to the receptionist. "I'm calling to clarify a notification I received regarding the estate of Gregory Hale. My name is Chloe Rivera." "One moment. Ms. Rivera." I was put on hold, listening to a bland classical tune. A new voice, an assistant, came on the line. She sounded efficient, wary. "Ms. Rivera, how can I help you? Are you a creditor of the estate?" "No," I said, my words careful, precise. "I'm a resident at an address that received a letter. It was very confusing. It was addressed to someone named Celine Navarro. I think it might be a mistake, but it mentioned Mr. Hale's will." There was a sharp, sudden silence on the other end, then the assistant's voice, her professional guard dropping, flooding with relief. "Oh, thank goodness," she exhaled. "We were wondering when Ms. Navarro would finally reach out. Mr. Hale's passing has, well, it's expedited things. We've been trying to locate you for months." Months. My blood ran cold. I kept my voice steady, playing dumb. "I'm sorry. I think you're mistaken. My name is Chloe Rivera. I just live at this address. I don't know any Celine Navarro." "Oh," the assistant said, her voice snapping back to formal, guarded professionalism. She had slipped. "Oh, I see. My apologies. I cannot discuss the particulars of the estate with you, but Ms. Celine Navarro Hale, that is. Ms. Navarro is a named beneficiary. We have been sending correspondence to that address." "Why that address?" I pressed, my heart hammering. It was the last known residence we had on file for her, or for her legal guardian, Ms. Maria Navarro. Maria Navarro, my mother. "So you've just been sending letters?" I asked. "Yes, several. Certified mail. For months, even before Mr. Hale's passing. He was very insistent we make contact. If Ms. Navarro is not at that address, we need to know immediately." "I see," I said, my throat closing. "No, I've never seen her. I'll let you know if I do." I hung up the phone. I stood up and walked to the small, cheap mirror by my front door. Certified mail. For months. Letters that my mother had clearly been intercepting from my mailbox. Letters from a billionaire grandfather who was trying to find me. Letters she hid. Letters she destroyed. Because if I found out, her new financial plan, me would be compromised. I stared at my reflection. The Hale eyes. The Hale jaw. I wasn't just their financial plan. I was their stolen lottery ticket. The rage that had been a hot, sick feeling in my stomach for 2 days finally cooled. It didn't disappear. It crystallized. It turned into something hard, clear, and perfectly, terrifyingly calm. I was a data analyst. My job was to find the signal in the noise. The lies were the noise. The truth was the signal. My first instinct had been to drive to Aurora, to slam my spreadsheets and my original birth certificate down on their granite countertop and scream, "Why? How could you?" But I stopped myself. My hand on my apartment doorknob. I knew exactly how that would play out. I had lived that scene 100 times in smaller, less devastating ways. My mother, Maria, would burst into tears. She would collapse onto the sofa, a victim. She would talk about sacrifice, about the impossible choices she had to make. She would accuse me of being ungrateful, of being cold, of trying to destroy the family. My father, Tom, would stand in the doorway, his face a mask of shame and avoidance, muttering, "It was complicated. Mija, we did what we had to do." They would gaslight me, twist the narrative, and by the time I left, I would be the villain. I would be the one apologizing, just as I had apologized for being hesitant to pay for their new television. No, a private confrontation was a fight they had trained me to lose my entire life. I was not going to fight them. I was going to let the truth do the work. My anger shifted. The hurt receded, replaced by a cold, methodical clarity. I closed my laptop. I printed my documents. I put them in a crisp, manila folder. I picked up my phone and called the number for Hale Bracken, LLP. "Yes," I said to the assistant, my voice perfectly level. "This is Celine Navarro. I need to schedule a meeting with Mr. Bracken regarding the estate of Gregory Hale." The next afternoon, I was sitting in a leather chair that probably cost more than my car. The law office was on the 42nd floor of a glass tower downtown. The air was silent, smelling of expensive wood and old paper. It was a world of quiet, heavy power. Miles Bracken, the attorney from the obituary, the man my mother had screamed at in my imagination, was not what I expected. He wasn't warm, but he wasn't unkind. He looked at me over the top of his half-moon glasses, his expression one of neutral, professional curiosity. "Ms. Navarro," he said, his voice as dry as it was in my memory. "You indicated on the phone that you have information to confirm your identity." I didn't speak. I simply opened my folder and slid the first document across the acres of polished mahogany, my official birth certificate, Celine Navarro Hale. He looked at it, his expression unchanging. "We have a copy of this on file, provided by Mr. Hale. This proves you were born. It does not prove you are you." I slid the second document across. My legal name change petition, filed by Maria Celine Navarro, approved October 5th, 1998. I followed it with my Colorado driver's license, Chloe Rivera. His eyes moved from the documents to my face, really looking at me for the first time. He was looking for the resemblance. He saw it. His gaze lingered on my jawline and my eyes. "I see," he said, the words quiet. "That's who I am," I said. "This is what they did." Then, I slid the rest of my research across his desk, my spreadsheets, my bank records. "This," I said, tapping the first sheet, "is a record of all quarterly deposits from the Hale Family Holdings Trust into a savings account controlled by my mother, from my birth until my 18th birthday, totaling over $400,000. I pushed the second spreadsheet forward. "And this is a record of all transfers from my personal checking account to my mother, my father, and their business, starting just over 2 years after the Hale Trust payments stopped, totaling $47,320 as of 3 days ago." I was the analyst. This was my data. It did not lie. Mr. Bracken was silent for a full minute. He stared at the two spreadsheets. The clear, undeniable pattern. The moment one source of income, Gregory Hale, ran dry. Another, Chloe Rivera, was tapped to replace it. He finally leaned back, removing his glasses and rubbing the bridge of his nose. He looked old, and for the first time, profoundly tired. "Ms. Hale," he said, and the name hit me like a physical touch. "I was Gregory's attorney for 30 years. He was a difficult man. He was not a bad man. He had been looking for you since the day you disappeared." He turned to his own meticulously organized files and pulled out a thick-bound folder. "Gregory did more than create a trust, believing you'd been taken away," Bracken said, his voice flat with legal precision. "He created that trust as part of a binding, legal settlement with your mother." He opened the folder, and there it was, a contract, signed in 1995, signed by Gregory T. Hale, and signed by Maria Celine Navarro. Gregory had sued for custody, your mother, in response, threatened to vanish, to take you where he would never find you. This settlement was his compromise. He agreed to drop the lawsuit and provide substantial monthly support, $5,000 a month, adjusted for inflation, until you turned 18. Bracken looked at me, his eyes sharp. But the payments came with conditions. 2, specifically. 1, your mother was to provide the estate with a current address and photo of you once per year, to prove your welfare. 2, on your 18th birthday, she was legally required to tell you the truth about your father, Daniel, and facilitate a meeting with Gregory. Your inheritance, and your access to the larger Hale family, was contingent on it. I felt the blood drain from my face. She broke the agreement. She broke every word of it, Bracken said, his voice cold with an old anger. The first year, she sent a photo and an address. The second year, the address was a P.O. box. The third year, nothing. She changed your name. She married Mr. Rivera. And she vanished. She moved cities, from Denver to Aurora, and covered her tracks. She treated Gregory's payments, money that was earmarked for you, as a personal slush fund. He pointed to my spreadsheet. She treated it as family sacrifice money, and when it ran out, she simply turned to you and continued the grift. I sat in stunned, frozen silence. My entire childhood, every speech from my father about how hard we work, every time my mother called herself a survivor, it was all funded by the man they had painted as a monster and stolen me from. "And the will," I whispered, my throat tight. "Gregory never gave up looking," Bracken said. He pulled out a separate, thinner document. "He changed his will a dozen times, but the core of it remained the same. He instructed us to use every resource to find you. His investigators located you 6 months ago, living as Chloe Rivera. He was debating how to approach you. He was afraid of what your mother had told you, afraid of frightening you away. He died before he could decide." He slid the will across the table. I read the paragraph, the same one I had imagined from the obituary. "I leave the majority of my personal, non-corporate estate, including the Hale residence, all investment accounts, and all liquid cash assets to my granddaughter, Celine Navarro Hale, currently believed living under another name." I stared at the words, and a single, hot tear finally escaped, tracing a path down my cold cheek. In that moment, I realized a devastating truth. Gregory Hale, a man I had never met, a man I only knew as a severe, painted face, had done more to acknowledge my existence in his death than my own mother and the man who raised me had done in my entire life. They had erased me. He had written me back into existence. "I need to see it," I said, my voice hoarse. "The correspondence between him and my mother, from the beginning." Bracken nodded slowly. He knew what I was asking for. The proof, the final, damning nail. He handed me the file. It was full of copies, letters from Gregory, formal, stiff, dictated through lawyers. "We request a meeting to discuss Celine's educational future. We are legally entitled to visitation. Please respond to our requests for a welfare check." And then, my mother's replies, handwritten, on cheap, lined notebook paper, her looping, dramatic cursive. They were masterpieces of manipulation. 1, from 1995, read Mr. Kais, Hale. "Your money cannot buy you a family. You are a cold, controlling man. I will not have you poison my daughter with your bitterness. She is happy. She is safe. All you care about is your bloodline. I care about a human child." Tucked behind that letter was the bank statement showing she had cashed his check for $5,000 3 days later. Another. "From 1997, I am taking her away from this city. Your constant hounding is a threat to our safety. If you loved your son, you would let his daughter live in peace, not use her as a pawn in your sick game. And the bank statement, showing the check cashed, I felt sick. I closed the folder. I had seen enough. The assets you stand to inherit, Bracken said quietly, folding his hands, are substantial, in the range of $50 million. I barely heard him. The number was meaningless. It was just more noise. The actions of your mother and her husband, he continued, are fraudulent. The settlement agreement was breached. The money they took under false pretenses is recoverable. With your testimony, we could pursue civil charges. Given the amount and the duration, criminal charges for fraud and mail fraud are not out of the question. He was asking me what I wanted to do, if I wanted to send them to prison. I hesitated. The analyst in me saw the clean logic. They broke the law. They should face the consequences. But the child in me, the girl who had spent 20 years being the sensible one, felt a deep, wrenching pull to put my own mother in prison, to destroy my father's life over his weakness. Then I remembered. I remembered the taste of instant noodles, day after day. I remembered the throb in my tooth. I remembered my worn-out shoes and Evan's new sneakers. I remembered my mother's voice on the phone, dripping with praise right before she asked for my rent money. I remembered the feeling of being a walking bank account, an ATM with a pulse. They hadn't just stolen from Gregory Hale. They had stolen me from him, and then they had stolen my life from me, one small, desperate wire transfer at a time. I looked up at Mr. Bracken, the cold clarity back, sharp as a diamond. Prison was too easy. A private lawsuit was just another secret, another fight they could spin, another story they could tell themselves about being victims. No, the revenge I wanted was the one they had trained me for, the one my mother had used against Gregory Hale. Public humiliation. I don't want to press charges, I said, my voice steady. Not yet. I want something else. What? My mother hid me for 24 years. I said, she buried Celine Navarro Hale. I want to unbury her. A plan began to form, cold and perfect. I want a public will reading, the one Gregory requested, the one you've been trying to set up. Bracken looked confused. But Ms. Hale, you're the primary beneficiary. There's no legal need for a public reading. We can settle this privately. I know, I said. But I want one. I want every distant cousin, every old business partner, every person from his world who might have wondered what happened to the Hale line, to be in that room. I want all those judgmental, wealthy people my mother pretends to be one of. I leaned forward. And I want them there, my parents. You want to confront them? No, I said. I want them to walk into that room believing they are just paying their respects. I want them to have no warning. I want them to sit in that marble hall, performing their roles as the quiet, grieving neighbors. And I want to watch their faces when you read the name Celine Navarro Hale and announce that she is inheriting everything. I wanted the truth to land on them like a bomb, in a room full of witnesses, where their tears and their gaslighting would be useless. Mr. Bracken was silent for a long moment, processing the strategic cruelty of it. He had, after all, worked for Gregory Hale for 30 years. He understood. A very slow, very thin smile touched the corner of his mouth. That, he said, can be arranged. Send the invitation for me for Celine to my apartment, I said. My mother visits. She checks my mail. She'll see it. She'll hide it. She'll think she's contained the threat, just like she always has. And your parents? He asked. Send their invitation to their home. Address it to the Rivera family. A formal, vague invitation for all attendees, just as Mr. Hale specified. Let them think it's a networking opportunity. Let them walk right into the trap, heads held high. Mr. Bracken and I sat there, two quiet conspirators in a room high above the city. We were coordinating a very formal, very polite, and very public execution. The plan worked so perfectly. It was almost anticlimactic. 2 days after my meeting with Mr. Bracken, the heavy, cream-colored invitation arrived. I knew because my mother called me, her voice breezy. Hey, mija. I'm in your neighborhood. Just wanted to drop off some pasteles I made for you. I'm just going to use your spare key and leave them on the counter. Okay. Don't want to bother you at work. I stared at my phone, a cold smile touching my lips. She had never once, in the 3 years I'd lived there, just dropped by while I was at work. She was checking my mail. She was looking for the letter from the law firm. When I got home that night, the apartment smelled of anise and fried dough. And my mail, which I had purposefully let pile up for 2 days, was neatly stacked on my kitchen table, except for one piece. The thick, cream-colored envelope addressed to Ms. Celine Navarro Hale was gone. She had taken it. She had stolen the invitation to my own life, believing she had, once again, contained the threat. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that Mr. Bracken was better at this game than she was. 1 minute later, my laptop pinged. An email from Miles Bracken. Subject: digital copy for your records. Attached was a high-resolution PDF scan of the exact same invitation. I had my ticket, and she had no idea I was even going to the show. I waited a full day. I let her sit with her stolen secret. Let her believe she was safe. Then, I called her. Hey, Mom, I said, pitching my voice to sound casual, a little tired from work. I just got this weird invitation in the mail. For the Rivera family. To some will reading for that billionaire guy who died, Gregory Hale. Why would we be invited to that? We don't know him. There was a pause on her end. Just a fraction of a second too long. She was recalibrating, switching from her role as secret keeper to social climber. Oh, that, she finally said, her voice bright and dismissive. I know. Isn't it strange? Your father and I knew him. Just a little, from the community. Years ago. A very generous man. He donated to a few restaurant drives. The lie was so smooth, so practiced. But a will reading, I pressed, playing the confused daughter. That seems really personal and weird. I have to work on Tuesday. Don't be silly, Chloe, she said, her voice taking on that familiar, chiding tone. You are absolutely going. We all are. This is a networking opportunity. You need to see how these people live. The most important people in Denver will be at that house. You don't get chances like this, mija. It's about connections. You'll take the day off. I don't know, Mom. You'll take the day off, she repeated, her voice no longer suggesting. It was an order, the order I had been waiting for. Okay, I sighed, as if defeated. If it's that important to you, I'll ask for the day off. Good, she said, satisfied. Wear that nice blue blazer you have. And Chloe, stand up straight. We need to look like we belong. I hung up the phone, a cold, still feeling in my chest. Look like we belong. The irony was so bitter it almost choked me. The next morning, I went into my boss's office at Northline Metrics. My boss, a decent man named Mark, looked up from his screen. Hey, Chloe, what's up? Need something? Hi, Mark. I need to request this coming Tuesday off. I have to take care of some family legal matters. He must have seen the exhaustion, the gravity in my face. My performance as the sensible, responsible employee had been flawless for 3 years. He knew this wasn't me skipping work for a hangover. Is everything okay? He asked, his voice softening. It's complicated, I said, using my family's favorite word. But it's something I have to handle. It's about an estate. Of course, he said, nodding. No more questions asked. Take the day. Take Wednesday too. If you need it, you've more than earned it. Chloe, your quarterly reports have been outstanding. Let me know if you or your family need anything. I was struck by the simple, professional support. He didn't demand details. He didn't make me feel guilty. He just saw my value and offered help. It was a cleaner, more honest transaction than any I had ever had with my own family. Thanks, Mark, I said. I really appreciate that. The night before the reading, my apartment was silent. I didn't pace. I didn't panic. I just prepared. I laid out my armor, the thrift store navy blazer, a simple black shell, my best pair of black slacks, my worn-down loafers, which I polished until the cracked leather had a dull shine. It was the same outfit I would have worn to an important meeting at Northline. It was the uniform of Chloe Rivera, the sensible one. It felt appropriate. On my desk sat the manila folder, my proof, my birth certificate, the bank statements, the spreadsheet that quantified my entire life's worth of exploitation. I picked it up. I felt the weight of it in my hands. I had planned to bring it, to have it ready, just in case, a weapon in my pocket. But as I stood there in the quiet, I realized I didn't need it. My revenge wasn't going to be a theatrical showdown. Me pulling out documents like a lawyer in a bad movie. Mr. Bracken already had all the proof. He held all the cards. My only job tomorrow was to be a witness, to be the rock that their lies would finally break against. I slid the folder back onto my desk. I was going in empty-handed. I sat down at my small kitchen table and opened my journal. Something I hadn't done in months. I looked at the blank page. I thought about the next day, the end of my life as I knew it, and the beginning of something else, something I couldn't yet name. I wrote a single line on the page. Tomorrow, I stopped paying for the lie they built around me. We drove to the Hale estate in my father's aging catering van. The irony was not lost on me. The vehicle smelled faintly of stale carnitas and cleaning solution. My mother, sitting in the passenger seat, was vibrating with a nervous, social energy. My father gripped the wheel, his knuckles white, his eyes darting to the massive, multi-million-dollar homes we passed, as if he expected them to attack. Evan was in the back, thrilled. He had his phone out, filming everything, providing obnoxious commentary for his non-existent followers. Yo, we are rolling into straight-up billionaire territory. This is legit. Dad, are these people gonna have, solid gold toilets? Put that phone away, Evan, my mother snapped, her voice tight, and fix your hair. You look like a bum. We pulled up to the black iron gates. A private security guard with a clipboard and an earpiece approached the van. His expression one of polite disdain. He looked at our vehicle, then at us, and his face settled into an expression I knew well. He thought we were the help. Name, he said, his voice flat. The Rivera family, my mother said, her voice a full octave higher, dripping with importance. He scanned the list. Ah, yes, Rivera. You can park in the service lot, around the back by the kitchens. Excuse me? My mother sputtered, her face flushing red. We are guests of the family. All overflow parking is in the service lot, ma'am, he said, his eyes already looking past us to the black Mercedes gliding up behind. My father, avoiding conflict as always, just muttered, It's fine, Maria. It's just parking. He steered the van toward the service entrance, past rows of identical black catering trucks and landscapers' pickups. We were exactly where the world, and this house, assumed we belonged. As we walked from the service lot, I could feel the weight of the estate, the security cameras mounted discreetly on the stone walls, the crunch of our shoes on the gravel, the sheer, oppressive scale of the house. My mother, however, had already recovered. As we stepped into the marble foyer, she was back in character. She was Maria Rivera, the dignified, quietly grieving acquaintance. She air-kissed a woman who looked right through her. She offered a sad, knowing nod to a man who clearly had no idea who she was. She was performing a long, emotional connection to Gregory Hale that I knew, for a fact, was a complete fabrication. Evan was even worse. He was in full content creation mode, his phone half hidden, recording discrete clips of the art, the chandelier, the wealthy guests. He kept whispering in my ear, Dude, this is insane. That painting is probably worth more than our whole neighborhood. Maybe there'll be, some kind of influencer deal out of this. Rich people love charity stories, right? Just be quiet, Evan, I murmured, pulling away from him. We were guided into the drawing room, the same room from my nightmares, the oil paintings, the marble fireplace, the stiff, antique chairs, and then I saw him. Mr. Bracken. He was standing near the front, speaking to a tall, silver-haired woman in a diamond brooch. As we entered, his eyes scanned the room and found us. He excused himself from the woman and walked directly toward us, toward me. My father shrank back. My mother pasted on her sweetest, most respectful smile. "Mr. Bracken," she said, extending a hand. "Maria Rivera. It is so tragic. About Gregory. We knew him." Bracken ignored her outstretched hand. He ignored my father. He ignored Evan. His eyes, cool and analytical, locked directly onto mine, and in front of everyone, in a clear, formal voice that carried in the hushed room, he said, "Ms. Navarro-Hale, thank you for coming. We are ready to begin." My mother's hand froze in midair. The color drained from her face. I saw her knuckles turn white as she clasped her hands together, digging her nails in. My father flinched as if he'd been slapped. He took a half-step back, his eyes wide with a sudden, dawning terror. Evan just looked confused. "Navarro what? Who's he talking to?" I said nothing. I just looked at Miles Bracken, held his gaze, and gave him a single, barely perceptible nod. "Please, find your seats," he said, gesturing to the rows of chairs. We sat, exactly where I had imagined it. In the back, the three of them, my mother, a rigid statue of barely contained panic, my father, who was now visibly trembling and trying to wipe his damp palms on his slacks, and Evan, who was frowning, finally realizing this wasn't just a fun field trip. I sat beside them. My heartbeat was a slow, heavy drum. It aligned perfectly with the rhythmic, ominous ticking of the massive grandfather clock in the hallway. I was no longer Chloe Rivera, the responsible daughter. I was Celine Navarro-Hale, the executioner, and I was waiting for the axe to fall. Mr. Bracken stood at the lectern, the room falling silent. He cleared his throat. He looked down at the document, and I saw him turn the page to the crucial paragraph. I took a slow, deep breath, bracing myself for the explosion. Mr. Bracken looked down at the thick, bonded paper. The room was so quiet, so perfectly still, that I could hear the tiny metallic whir of the security camera in the corner of the ceiling. My mother, beside me, was rigid, her breathing shallow and sharp. My father seemed to be trying to sink into the floor. The lawyer's voice was a dry, legal monotone, an instrument of facts. "And now," he said, his gaze sweeping the room before landing, deliberately, on me. "We come to the remainder of the estate, all personal properties, including this house and its contents, all liquid assets, and the controlling shares in Hale Logistics Group are to be placed in trust for the sole benefit of my granddaughter." The word detonated in the silence. Granddaughter. A wave of sound washed through the room, 100 whispers, gasps, and shocked murmurs. Who Daniels? I thought he had no one. Mr. Bracken raised his hand slightly, and the room quieted, hungry for the answer. He raised his voice, cutting through the residual noise with absolute clarity. "To my granddaughter, born Celine Navarro-Hale on March 12, 1994. He wasn't looking at the paper anymore. He was looking right at me. Currently believed to be living under an assumed name used by her mother without my consent. It was a physical force. Dozens of heads swiveled in unison, a flock of birds turning on a single, invisible cue. They were all staring at me. The woman with the diamond brooch, her mouth a perfect O of shock. The cousins who had looked at me with disdain. My father, his face ashen. My brother, his phone forgotten, his jaw slack. Their eyes were burning into my skin. The sound that came from my mother was not a word. It was a scrape, a choking sound, followed by the loud, violent crack of her antique chair toppling backward onto the marble floor. She shot to her feet, her face a mask of pure, white terror. Her carefully constructed facade of the dignified, grieving neighbor didn't just slip. It disintegrated. It was gone. "No!" she shrieked, the sound ragged, torn from the deepest part of her. And then she screamed the words I had been waiting for, the words that would end her entire life. "That's not your real name." Absolute, ringing silence for 3 full seconds. The entire room held its breath. Then, chaos. A woman in the front row gasped so loudly it was almost a scream. I saw it. A constellation of red lights appearing in the crowd. 3, then 5, then a dozen people raising their phones, their screens bright as they hit record. This was no longer a private, family affair. This was a public execution. This was content. "What the hell? Mom?" Evan hissed, his voice cracking with a panic I had never heard from him. He wasn't filming. He was staring at her, his face pale. Finally understanding that he was not at a networking event. He was at the center of a scandal. Mr. Bracken did not flinch. He did not look surprised. He simply watched my mother, who stood there trembling, exposed, her hand hovering near her mouth as if she could catch the words and stuff them back in. He had been waiting for this. We had planned for it. "On the contrary, Ms. Rivera," he said, his voice a scalpel, cutting cleanly through the noise. The room went quiet again, desperate not to miss the next drop of blood. "We have extensive legal documentation, including an original birth certificate and a subsequent petition for a name change, proving that Ms. Chloe Rivera is, in fact, Celine Navarro Hale." He gestured toward me, not with a pointing finger, but with an open, respectful hand. Mr. Hale was fully aware of his granddaughter's identity. He had located her 6 months ago. He considered her his sole surviving heir. The confirmation that this was not a mistake, that this was real, shattered my mother's terror and replaced it with a desperate, frantic performance. She turned to the crowd, her hands outstretched, her face crumpling into the mask of the victim. "You don't understand," she cried, and the tears came, massive, theatrical tears streaming down her face. "He was a monster, that man." She spun and pointed a shaking, accusatory finger at the massive portrait of Gregory Hale above the fireplace. "He was a controlling, vicious monster. He tried to take her from me." She was playing to the room now, her voice rising, becoming hysterical, calibrated to win the sympathy of the other wealthy, powerful people in the room. I had to protect her. I had to. I changed her name to keep her safe. I ran. I did what any mother would do to protect her child from a man like that. I saved her. Mr. Bracken let her wail, hang in the air for a single, damning beat. He did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He simply looked down at the open folder on his lectern, the folder I had reviewed. "Mr. Hale's control, as you call it, Ms. Rivera," he said, his voice flat and cold, "seems to have taken the form of a legally binding settlement, which you signed on August 1st, 1995. He picked up a single sheet of paper. "I have here," he said, "a copy of that settlement, in which Mr. Hale agreed to cease all custody proceedings. I also have copies of correspondence in which he begged for access. He agreed to your financial demands. He asked only to be allowed to know his granddaughter. He asked for a single photograph a year." He looked directly at my mother, his eyes devoid of mercy. "And in this settlement," he continued, his voice ringing with legal authority, "you agreed to one very specific, non-negotiable condition." He read directly from the page. "That on the 18th birthday of Celine Navarro Hale, you, her mother, would inform her of her true paternity and facilitate an introduction to her grandfather, Gregory T. Hale, at which point she would be granted access to her full inheritance." He paused, then looked up at the sea of shocked, horrified faces. "The estate has bank records confirming that you, Ms. Rivera, accepted the monthly payments stipulated in this agreement, payments of $5,000 every month for 18 years, totaling over $1 million, and you never, not once, fulfilled your end of the bargain." The gasp in the room was different this time. It wasn't shock. It was cold, sharp disgust. The victim narrative had just died. The fraud narrative had just been born. My father, Tom, tried to stand. He pushed himself halfway up, his face slick with sweat, his voice a pathetic murmur. We did what we had to. It was complicated. We did it for the family. His words were hollow, meaningless. They dissolved instantly in the vast marble room. I heard the whisper, sharp and clear, from the row behind me, a man's voice, dripping with contempt. So they took the money, hid the kid, and lied for 20+ years. My God. The public humiliation was absolute. The Rivera family, the proud, sacrificing unit, was a lie. Evan's head was swiveling back and forth, from the lawyer, to his mother's ugly, broken sobs, to the hostile crowd filming them. I could see the gears turning in his terrified, selfish mind. His parents were toxic. His influencer dream was a joke. This was about money. It had always been about money. He stood up, his voice cracking, a desperate, childish wail. Wait, so what about, does this affect me? Am I in the will? The entire room seemed to recoil from the sheer, naked greed of the question. Mr. Bracken looked at my brother as if he were a bug. His voice was flat, indifferent, and brutal. Mr. Hale has left you nothing, young man. He did not know you existed. Evan's face crumpled. He did, however, Bracken continued, his gaze shifting, finally, back to me. Entrust your sister with all decisions regarding any discretionary support from the estate. And there it was, the final, perfect transfer of power. The tap they had been draining for my entire life was not just off. The plumbing had been reversed. I was no longer the bank. I was the banker. I sat perfectly still. I did not cry. I did not smile. I just watched. I watched my mother collapse into a chair, a broken, sobbing mess. I watched my father put his head in his hands, a completely shattered man. The room was a sea of whispers, phone screens, and hostile, judgmental stares. Mr. Bracken looked down at the will one last time. He raised his voice, projecting for the entire room, for the rolling cameras, for the official record. Gregory Hale leaves the lion's share of his personal estate, valued at approximately $50 million, to... He paused, and his eyes locked with mine. My granddaughter, Celine, whose life was stolen from her in my absence. The words hit me harder than any insult, any lie, any gaslighting my mother had ever thrown at me. Whose life was stolen from her. A man I had never met, a dead billionaire, had seen me. In one single, perfectly crafted sentence, he had validated my entire existence, and he had given me my life back. Mr. Bracken's words hung in the air. A final judgment. My mother, Maria, was no longer sobbing. She was a hollowed-out shell, her mouth open, her chest heaving silently. My father just stared at his hands, which were shaking so badly he looked like he had palsy. The room, which had been frozen in stunned silence, fractured. It broke apart into small, nervous, buzzing clumps. The formal reading was over. The social autopsy had begun. I watched as the narrative of the Rivera family was rewritten in real time, in hushed whispers and sharp, disgusted glances. Most of the guests, the distant cousins, the old money neighbors, the business partners formed a wide, hostile perimeter around my parents. They looked at my mother and father as if they were something contagious, something filthy that had been smuggled into this clean, wealthy space. They were a virus. The whispers were sharp. $1 million fraud hid the poor girl her whole life. Can you imagine the nerve? A different energy directed itself at me. The woman with the diamond brooch, Beatrice Vance, the one who had gotten the wine cellar and nothing more, was the first to move. Her entire demeanor had changed. She was no longer severe and judgmental. She was gliding toward me, her face arranged in a mask of warm, sympathetic concern. "You poor, poor child," she murmured, her voice like warm honey. She actually reached out and touched my arm, her rings cold against my thrift store blazer. "Celine, is it What a terrible, terrible ordeal. I am your great aunt. You know, on Daniel's mother's side. We must have lunch. We have so much to catch up on. Before I could answer, another man, handsome and in his 50s, stepped in. Beatrice, don't crowd the girl. Ms. Hale, I'm Robert Hale, your grandfather's cousin. I just want to say, on behalf of our side of the family, welcome. We are just so profoundly sorry for what those people have done to you. He glared past me at my father. His contempt of physical force. I was a spectacle, a prize, a sudden, new power center, but I was yanked back from my new reality by a hand I knew all too well. My mother's fingers dug into my bicep, her grip like a steel trap. She pulled me, hard, toward a small alcove by the window, away from my new, concerned relatives. Her face was no longer crumpled in tears. It was a tight, furious mask of pure, desperate panic. This was not the grieving victim. This was the cornered animal. "You have to stop this," she hissed, her voice a low, venomous whisper. Evan and my father stumbled after us, a pathetic, broken entourage. "Chloe, Mija, you listen to me. This is a family matter. This is private. You don't understand these people. They are not your friends." "My friends," I said, my voice coming out as cold and dead as I felt. "You cannot talk to them. You cannot talk to that lawyer, and you cannot talk to the press," she insisted, her eyes wild, darting toward the other guests. "We can fix this. We can explain. But you have to be quiet. You are destroying this family. You are destroying us. After everything we did for you, you would do this." I looked at her hand on my arm, the nails digging into my skin. I didn't pull away. I just stared at it until she, finally, let go, her hand recoiling as if she'd been burned. "The lawyers already know everything, Mom," I said, my voice quiet. But it cut through her panic. Her face froze. "What do you mean?" "I've been meeting with Mr. Bracken for a week. I'm the one who gave him the bank records. I'm the one who gave him the spreadsheets. I'm the one who told him to hold this reading." The color, the fight, all of it just drained away, leaving a slack-jawed, horrified stranger. She finally understood. This hadn't happened to us. I had done this to her. "I didn't destroy the family," I said, my voice as flat and final as a closing door. "I just destroyed your ability to lie without consequences." "Chloe," my father whispered, his voice broken. "Mom, Dad," Evan suddenly hissed, his face a new shade of white. He was staring, terrified, at his phone. "Oh my God. It's online. It's everywhere." "What?" my mother snapped. Evan's hands were shaking. "The video." From inside, someone posted the video. He shoved his phone forward, and there it was, a shaky, vertical video, filmed by one of the cousins in the crowd. It was the moment, my mother, her face distorted in a mask of rage and terror, leaping to her feet, her chair cracking against the floor, her voice a raw shriek. "That's not your real name." It was already on Twitter, on Instagram, on TikTok. It had thousands of views. The caption on the one he was looking at read, "Billionaire's secret granddaughter revealed at will reading. Grifter parents. Exposed." "Oh, God," my father groaned, sinking against the wall. "The comments," Evan whispered, scrolling frantically. "They're, oh, God, Mom, they're calling you. They're calling us. They're finding my streaming channel. They're finding the restaurant on Yelp." I knew exactly what those comments would say. They wouldn't see a protective mother. They would see the numbers. They would see the story. Laid bare. Exploitation. Financial abuse. They stole her inheritance and then made her pay their bills. The definition of emotional abuse cloaked as sacrifice. The truth, the one they had buried for 24 years, was now public, permanent, and viral. "Ms. Hale," Mr. Bracken's calm voice cut through our toxic little huddle. My family flinched, like rats caught in a searchlight. "My parents and I," he said, gesturing to my mother and father with a cold, formal nod. Need to have a brief conversation in Mr. Hale's study. I would advise you to join us. Evan, you are not required. I'm coming, Evan snapped, his fear making him aggressive. He was terrified of what would be decided without him. Mr. Bracken led us out of the drawing room, down a quiet, wood-paneled hall, and into a study that was the very definition of old money, dark leather, thousands of books, a massive desk. He closed the doors, and the silence was heavy, suffocating. My mother, Tom, and Evan sat on a leather sofa, a row of defendants. I stood near the desk, next to Mr. Bracken. Now that the public formalities are over, Bracken began, his voice devoid of any emotion. We must discuss the legalities. Ms. Rivera, Mr. Rivera, the estate is now in the process of reviewing all past financial dealings concerning Ms. Hale. He steepled his fingers. As you were just reminded, you were in breach of a legally binding contract for approximately 23 years. The support payments you accepted, totaling over $1 million, were accepted under fraudulent pretenses. It wasn't fraud, my mother shrieked, her voice cracking. It was child support. He owed us that. He owed Celine that, Bracken corrected, his voice like ice. Money you converted for your own use, to buy granite countertops, new televisions, and I assume, seed money for a restaurant, money you treated as free and clear. He let that sit in the air. The estate, he continued, is, of course, reviewing its options. This includes, but is not limited to, civil action to reclaim every dollar you were paid, plus interest, damages, and legal fees. Given the clear evidence of deception and the breach of contract, our case is— He paused, searching for the word. Ironclad. This was it, the final, crushing blow. Not just the loss of a future lottery ticket, but the bill for the last 24 years coming due. My mother finally, completely, broke. But it wasn't a breakdown of remorse. It was a breakdown of pure, undiluted rage. You, she screamed, leaping up from the sofa and pointing at me. This is you. You did this. I didn't move. He's poisoning you, she wailed, gesturing at Bracken. That man, Gregory, he was a monster, and even from the grave, he is controlling us. He is poisoning his own granddaughter against her family. She turned on Bracken. This isn't fair. This is a system rigged against people like us. We did what we had to do to survive. You rich people, you sit in your mansions and judge us. You don't know what it's like. And then, her eyes, hot and full of venom, snapped back to me. But you, after we raised you, after we fed you, clothed you, loved you, you were our daughter, and you do this. You dig all this up. You are so ungrateful. You're just like him. You took this truth, and you weaponized it just to destroy us. You are a poison, just like he was. Maria, stop. My father's voice was quiet. Dead. He hadn't moved, was still staring at his shaking hands. Stop it. Just stop. He looked up. Not at her, but at me. His eyes were defeated, empty. The mask was gone. The speeches about sacrifice were gone. There was only the weak, tired man I had been funding. She's right, Maria, he whispered. I always knew this day would come. Every time she wired another transfer, I told myself it was okay, that family deserves second chances, that we'd pay her back when the restaurant picked up. His voice broke, a dry, ugly sound. It was easier. It was easier to let her be the strong one. It was easier than facing this. He had confessed, not just to the crime, but to the weakness. Evan had been silent, his face pale, his eyes darting between all of us. He saw his future imploding. His parents were broke, and potentially about to be sued into oblivion. His sister, his new billionaire sister, hated him. He scrambled off the couch and came toward me, his hands half raised, his face a pathetic mask of desperation. Chloe, he said, his voice a wheedling whine I'd heard him use 1,000 times to get a new video game. Chloe, listen. This is really bad. This is really bad for my brand. The comments online. They're calling us monsters. They're calling me a leech. He glanced at our parents, then back at me, lowering his voice. You're not going to, you're not going to let them, right? If the media talks to you, if anyone talks to you, you'll at least say something nice about us. Right? About me. Just tell them I didn't know. Tell them I'm on your side. Please, Chloe. I stared at him, at my golden boy brother, who was, in the wreckage of his family, only worried about his social media reputation. I said nothing. I turned away from his stupid, begging face. I turned away from my mother's hateful glare and my father's pathetic shame. I walked past Mr. Bracken, who nodded at me, a silent gesture of respect. I opened the heavy study door. I walked down the hall, my footsteps loud on the hardwood. I walked past the clusters of my new family, who watched me with curious, pitying eyes. I walked right out the massive front doors, into the cold, bright Colorado air. It was a shock. The gates of the estate were a wall of noise, paparazzi, local news vans, reporters, held back by security, shouting, their cameras flashing, a blinding, popping wall of light. They had been tipped off by Evan, the little fool, chasing relevance. And now, thanks to the viral video, they had their story. There she is, a woman shouted. Ms. Hale, Ms. Hale, is it true? Celine over here. The flashes were blinding, disorienting. I just kept my head down and walked, moving toward the driveway. Miss Hale, one reporter yelled, his voice cutting through the din, louder than the rest. How does it feel? How does it feel to inherit everything? I stopped. I was standing on the top step, the chaos of the media in front of me, the wreckage of my family behind me. I looked up, my eyes finding the source of the voice, a man holding a microphone. I thought about his question. How does it feel? I answered him, my voice simple, clear, and carrying in the cold air. Ask me again when I remember who that name is supposed to be. I got a rideshare back to my apartment. I had to push my way through the remaining gaggle of reporters at the estate gate, my face hidden, saying nothing. The driver kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror, his curiosity a palpable, annoying buzz in the car. I walked into my small, cramped apartment, and the silence was a physical weight. The contrast was so sharp it was almost surreal. Hours ago, I was sitting in a marble mansion, my name attached to a fortune with 8 zeros. Now, I was back in my tiny one-bedroom rental in Capitol Hill. The air smelled like my neighbor's garlic-heavy cooking. On my cheap Formica kitchen table, where I had eaten so many bowls of instant noodles, sat the single, thick, cream-colored folder Mr. Bracken had given me. It contained the summary of assets, the legal declarations. It looked absurdly out of place, like a priceless diamond sitting on a paper plate. My phone, which I had dared to turn back on, rang. The caller ID was private. I let it ring. It stopped, then immediately rang again. I picked it up. Ms. Hale? It was Mr. Bracken. His voice was as dry and professional as if the emotional detonation in his drawing room had been a routine clerical matter. Mr. Bracken? I said. My voice was hoarse. I wanted to confirm a few things, he said. The estate will immediately begin the process of transferring assets into your name. It will be complex. Within a few months, you will legally take ownership of the Hale house, the investment portfolio, and all associated accounts. Okay, I whispered. I sat down at the table, my legs suddenly weak. There is, however, the outstanding matter of your parents, he continued, his voice going, if possible, even colder. And the funds they misappropriated. You have decisions to make. Ms. Hale, the estate is prepared to act on your instruction. He outlined the options, his words clean, precise, and devoid of emotion. Option 1. We pursue full criminal charges, fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy, given the signed contract, the bank records, and the viral video of my mother's confession. A conviction was all but guaranteed. They would face prison time. Option 2. A full-blown civil suit. We would demand repayment of every cent of the $1,300,000 Gregory Hale had paid them, plus interest, damages, and all associated legal fees. It would be a public, brutal trial. It would bankrupt them, taking the restaurant, the house, their car, everything. It would erase them financially. Or, he said, and I heard the slight, calculated shift in his tone. Option 3. We negotiate a limited civil settlement, something that acknowledges their wrongdoing on the permanent record, enforces a significant financial penalty, but avoids, shall we say, the full emotional fallout of a criminal trial. He was asking me to choose my revenge, prison, absolute financial ruin, or something else. I leaned my head against the cold, cheap drywall of my kitchen, the phone hot against my ear. My apartment, which had once felt like my only safe harbor, now felt like a prison cell they had built for me. I flashed through a lifetime of memories. My mother's voice, dripping with praise right before she asked for money. You always come through. Mija, God really blessed us with you. The years I spent eating plain pasta and dented canned vegetables so they could buy emergency luxuries. The new espresso machine at the restaurant, Evan's new gaming rig, the throb in my back tooth, a constant, dull ache that I had ignored for 18 months because I couldn't afford the copay, all while I was paying for their essential vacations. But then, other, softer images pushed through the static. My father, Tom, in the empty high school parking lot on a hot, sunny Sunday, his patience, endless, running alongside me, one hand holding the seat of my wobbling second-hand bike, his face red with effort. You got it, Chloe. You got it. Don't stop pedaling. The moment he let go, and I was flying. My mother, Maria, sitting on the edge of my bed when I was 7 and sick with a terrifyingly high fever. Her singing, her voice low and soft, a Spanish lullaby about a sleeping dove. Her hand, cool and smelling of lotion, on my forehead. They weren't just monsters, they were human. They were flawed, weak, selfish, grasping, and human, and they were the only parents I had ever known. I looked at the folder on my table. I thought about the video, the one I knew was now rocketing around the world, my mother, her face a mask of screaming terror. My father, a gray, broken shell of a man, confessing his weakness in that study. My brother, his face a pathetic mask of greed and fear. What more was there to take from them, I realized, with a sudden, cold clarity, that the revenge had already happened. It happened the moment Mr. Bracken read my name. It happened the moment my mother screamed. The truth, delivered in a public forum, in front of their peers and a dozen recording phones. That was the bomb. The image they had spent a lifetime building, the perfect, sacrificing, hard-working immigrant family, had been vaporized under its own weight in less than 10 minutes. Any further punishment, prison. A public trial, it wouldn't be for justice. It would just be me, kicking the rubble. It would be an act of anger, not of closure. And it would tie me to them, in courtrooms and depositions. For years to come, I was done being tied to them. A settlement, I said into the phone, my voice clear and final. Option 3, draw it up. The final meeting took place 1 week later. It was not in the Hale mansion. It was back in the sterile, high-rise office of Hale Bracken. This was not a negotiation. It was a sentencing. They sat across from me at the impossibly long, polished mahogany conference table. They looked awful. My mother, Maria, looked 10 years older. Her eyes were puffy and black-ringed, but she was vibrating with a sullen, defeated anger. My father, Tom, just looked tired. He looked hollowed out, a gray, translucent shell of the man who used to give speeches about sacrifice. Evan was conspicuously absent. He hadn't returned a single text. I'd seen online that his streaming channel had been deleted. He was already trying to disappear. Mr. Bracken slid the documents across the table. This is a civil settlement, he said, his voice flat. It is not a negotiation. These are the terms. I let him do the talking, but they were my terms. I wasn't asking for the $1 million back. I wasn't even asking for the $47,000 I had personally given them. I didn't want their money. It was tainted. "You will sign this document," Mr. Bracken said, his voice precise. "It is a formal legal admission, in writing, of the deception. It states that you, Maria Rivera, knowingly and intentionally breached the 1995 settlement with Gregory Hale. It states that you intentionally concealed the identity and location of Celine Navarro Hale. It states that you accepted over $1 million under fraudulent pretenses." He pushed the second page forward. "You will forfeit any and all future claims to the Hale estate, in perpetuity. You will never contact Ms. Hale or any member of the Hale family or Hale Logistics Group for financial reasons ever again. A breach of this clause will trigger an immediate criminal referral." And the last part, the part I had insisted on. "You will repay a portion of what you took," he said. "Not all of it, but a portion. You will liquidate Rivera's table and any non-essential assets. You will pay a total of $100,000, not to Ms. Hale." I looked at my mother. "It will be paid directly to the Denver Children's Hospital Endowment Fund," I said, my voice steady. "In Gregory Hale's name." It wasn't about the money. It was about the consequence. It was about the act. There would be no jail time, but there would be accountability. There would be a permanent paper truth that they could never spin, never gaslight, never deny. My mother started to cry. The slow, hot, familiar tears of the martyr. "Chloe, please," she whispered, her voice rough. "This is everything. The restaurant, it's your father's life. You can't, we're your family. We love you." She was apologizing and justifying in the exact same manipulative breath. My father didn't look at the papers. He didn't look at his wife. He just looked at me, his eyes full of a terrible, dawning clarity. "We didn't realize," he said quietly, his voice so low I could barely hear it across the vast table. "We didn't realize we were teaching you that love means owing." I looked at this man who had been my father, the man who had taught me to ride a bike and then taught me to be his bank. "You taught me that love without boundaries is servitude," I replied. My voice was steady. There was not a single tremor in it. "I'm done serving." My mother let out a small, broken sound, like an animal. My father picked up the heavy, expensive pen from the holder, and with a hand that shook so badly he could barely form the letters, he signed his name. I walked out of the law firm alone. I didn't wait for the elevator. I took the stairs down 42 flights. When I pushed open the heavy glass door to the street, the air was cold and sharp. It stung my cheeks, and it felt clean. My phone, which I had turned back on, was buzzing relentlessly in my coat pocket, a constant, vibrating pull, messages from extended Hale relatives I had never met, all inviting me to dinner, messages from journalists at the Post, at Forbes, at CNN, a text from my boss, Mark, just asking if I was okay. I stopped on the sidewalk, the stream of pedestrians flowing around me. I pulled the phone out and looked at the cascade of notifications on the lock screen. All these people, wanting a piece of me, wanting the story, wanting the money, wanting the connection. I held down the power button and swiped the screen. Airplane mode. The buzzing stopped. There was just the sound of the city, the traffic, the wind. I walked. With no destination, I just walked. I passed a storefront, a dark, tinted glass window of an empty office building. I caught my reflection. It was the same face, the same angular jaw, the same dark eyes that had stared up at me from that old, pixelated photo of Daniel Hale, the same face that had stared down at me from Gregory Hale's massive, severe portrait. But the expression was finally my own. It wasn't the stressed, pinched, tired look of Chloe Rivera, the sensible daughter, calculating her bank balance to see if she could afford both groceries and her parents' utility bill. It wasn't the grateful, pleading look of the girl desperate for a crumb of her family's approval. It wasn't angry. It wasn't guilty. It was just free. And in that moment, I knew who I was. I knew what I was going to do. I would legally reclaim the name they stole from me. Celine Navarro Hale. I would reclaim it to honor the truth, to honor the grandfather who had spent 30 years trying to find me. But I would continue to live, day to day, as Chloe Rivera. Because Chloe was the woman who had built a life from nothing. Chloe was the one who had survived them. Chloe was the analyst who had uncovered the lie. Chloe was the woman who had learned the hard, painful, and expensive way. How to stop being a bank and finally become the banker of her own life. I walked the 3 miles back to my apartment. I stood at my front door, the same door I had hidden behind for years. I pulled out my key, I unlocked the door, and I stepped inside. I wasn't the scared, responsible daughter. I wasn't the confused, secret heir. I was just me, someone who finally knew exactly who she was. At the will reading of a strange billionaire, my mom screamed that my name was a lie. She was right about that, but what she didn't know was that the lie was over, and the truth, my truth, was worth more than any inheritance they ever stole. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Let me know where you are listening from in the comments so we can connect, and please share your thoughts. Make sure to subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting the hype button so this story can be heard by more people.